everyone. Welcome tonight to a panel discussing Vermont's public education system and the State College system and why we should talk about them together. We have a really exciting panel. Those of you who have been attending our weekly events know that we often have 4 or 5 people, but we really wanted to have an extremely broad conversation on this particular event. And so I am going to start introducing people. Please do sign in if you're online, either on our Facebook live stream or here. I want to let folks know that oftentimes we allow people to come in and ask their questions live. Because our panel is so big this time, we are going to ask you to put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we will make sure to get to them and answer them, and I will moderate those questions. Thank you all. And if you're watching from YouTube Live, our YouTube, or Progressive Insiders YouTube or Facebook page, if you watch on Progressive Insiders YouTube, then it is being monitored. If you watch on our Facebook page, it is being monitored. But the best place to ask questions is right here inside the event. And so we'll make sure to get that link up so that you can join anytime throughout the event, so that you can ask questions if you'd like. All right, so to get started, the first person I'm going to introduce is Danny Brzezowski. I hope I got it right this time. Yes? Okay. And Danny is a Vermont science teacher currently teaching biology and AP biology and anatomy and physiology. They used to work in the private sector and as a process engineer, and taught college level chemistry and organic chemistry. Their interests outside of education include EMS and LGBTQ plus activism. We're really excited to have Danny here, and I am going to let them introduce themselves.
Hello.
Go ahead, Danny.
Hello. Thank you again for inviting me to the panel tonight. As you said, I'm a Vermont educator. I am formerly a community college professor, not in the Vermont system, but in a different state's public higher ed. So naturally, I feel very strongly about the importance of education at all levels.
Wonderful. Thanks for coming. I am so excited you're here. Next, I want to introduce my friend, Representative Coach Christie, Kevin Christie, also known as Coach. Kevin is a resident of Hartford and was born in Hartford, Connecticut, so Hartford to Hartford. And he was the first elected to the Vermont House of Representatives. He was first elected to the Vermont House of Representatives in 2010, and also serves on the Hartford School Board, where he has served as chair. He was a high school teacher, a coach, and also he started coaching track football in 1980. So he has quite a lot of experience in our public school systems, and I'm really excited to have him with us today. You have to unmute, Coach.
There was a lot of clutter in that part of the screen. Thank you very much, Brenda. I'm really happy to be here tonight. Education is a very important piece of my personal awareness, and I feel that it is so critical to everyone. And you know, when I look around the screen and look at the folks that are here, it becomes very apparent why we're having this discussion. So I am really proud to be able to participate, and thanks for the invitation.
Thank you so much. And I want to now introduce, and I hope I get your name right also, Gina Otabani. I hope that's correct. And Gina is a historian of science. What?
It's close enough.
Okay. Gina is a historian of science, a faculty member at CCV, and a former Green Mountain College faculty member. She also taught middle school and high school and consulted on education projects. She serves in the Chittenden Select Board. Chittenden, by the way, for those you don't know, is in Rutland County. And we're excited to have you here.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here too. So in addition to teaching, I've spent a decent amount of time over the years, both studying education reform and thinking about educational systems writ large, which is really why I'm here and why I wanted to be on this panel. I'm interested, yes, in the details, in curriculum and how we train our teachers and the structure of our schools and the school day, among other things, but I'm also interested in the meta picture, if you will, and also in the culture that creates and informs the system as a whole. So I hope to be able to address some of that this evening with all of you.
Okay, now I'd like to introduce, thank you, Gina. I'd like to introduce Adrian Hutchin. And Adrian is a non-traditional student, first generation, and a senior at NVU Linden. She is a double major in global studies and criminal justice with a criminal law minor and a restorative justice concentration. Wow, that's incredible. And plans to read for the law when she graduates. And I am really excited to hear from you, Adrian.
Thank you for having me. Well, I'm a graduate of CTV. I graduated top of my class thanks to my professors there. And I have 2 kids in the public school system. I've worked extensively over the years with VSAC, so I'm well familiar with the financial aid portion of how things work. And I'm doing my whole schoolwork on scholarships because as a non-traditional student, I really can't take on the loans. So I know what it's like to have to work and scrap your way up through. I've been in the school system for quite a long time, and were it not for VSAC and the educational financial help, I wouldn't be here. So yeah, I have a big stake in this, and I was very much involved in the fight to save NVU. So this is very important to me as well.
Thank you, Adrian. And I just want to say that it's really important that we have everyone at the table, and that is why I'm really grateful that you are here, that's part of this discussion for sure. I want to now introduce Kate Gold. Kate Gold has served as president of the VSC United Professionals Union since 2018. She graduated from Dartmouth College in 1998, and after sampling a few Western states, she moved to Vermont with her husband in 2005 to work at Linden State, NVU Linden, and has been enjoying Vermont life ever since. Thanks for being here, Kate.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I also work in my day job. My official title is Director of Advising Resources and co-director of the Office of Institutional Research at NVU Linden. So I'm happy to see some familiar faces. I recognize Adrian's face from the hallways, even though I don't think we've officially met before. And Willow is my very awesome early college students. So I'm very happy to be here. And the more I think we can have conversations about what public education, including higher education, means to Vermont and for the future and for right now, I think the better off we'll all be.
Thank you, Kate. And I would love to welcome now Martha Allen, who I first met just before I decided to run for governor in 2018, and had many conversations about education back then when Martha was the president of the Vermont NEA. And I also had the pleasure of watching her run for office last time as well, and being able to join her for an event during the general election. And she taught in public schools for 30 years and served as Vermont NEA president for 9 years and worked for 1 year at Vermont NEA on racial justice. So I am really excited to have Martha Allen here with us tonight.
Thank you, Brenda. Hello, everybody. And I'm really happy that you're doing this because the timing is quite Of course, it's perfect timing for this. Just as Brenda mentioned, I've taught for 30 years. I taught for 30 years in Vermont. I was over in Grand Isle County initially for several years and then moved to Canaan. So I've been in the northwestern corner of the state, and now I live in the northeastern corner of the state, the crown of the Northeast Kingdom, I like to say. And public education, both my children went to school here in Vermont, and public education has been something I've been fighting for, along with support for the professionals who work in our public schools. And so the NVU issue is near and dear to me because we send in Canaan, a lot of our students go on to further their education in Linden. And the threat of that closing in one form or another is pretty scary for the community. So I'm glad to be here and hope I can provide some input.
Thanks, Martha. I now would like to welcome Brady Rainville. And Brady grew up in the Northeast Kingdom and attended Johnson State College. He went on to earn his master's degree in psychology at Stony Brook University, came back to Vermont after graduate school to work at Northern Vermont University as an academic advisor and adjunct psychology professor. So we're seeing firsthand what it can do to actually have the access to the education right here in this state.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda, for having me. I'm really excited. I, was really impacted in a lot of different ways growing up through NBU Linden or Linden State College. That's where my mom, who was the first in her family to get a college education, graduated from. And that's where my family lives. And then my brother and I, we went to Johnson State College, and it providing an interesting perspective. We both received scholarships to go there through our high school academics. And so we're able to graduate debt-free. And now both of us, I'm living in the Johnson area working at Johnson, and my brother's now in the Lindenville area working for the high school in Lindenville. So kind of offering that perspective of what affordable education can mean as an investment for.
Hi, everyone. So we have one more panelist to introduce, and that is Willow Schaefer. Willow is an early college student at Northern Vermont University. She's a high school senior at Blue Mountain Union School, which has a total of 450 kids, and lives in Groton, Vermont. She decided to advocate for NEK VSC schools and the early college dual enrollment program because she knows how important it is to her community and communities like hers. Her school has free and reduced lunch, almost 60%. So has seen what poverty looks like in our state and really feels passionate about this issue. Thank you, Willow, for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So as she said, my name is Schaefer, and I think what I bring to the table is the of a high school who has seen the kids who can't go to can't go to college without it being affordable, and they can't, access higher education without a certain amount of help, and without it being in their area, it's not an option really. So I think I kind of, represent those people, and I think that's what I bring to the table when I'm here. So thank you for having me here.
All right, I want to thank everyone. And now we're just going to give everybody a chance to kind of talk a little bit about what just happened here and where we think we need to go. Before we start, what I'm going to just let you know, first I'll introduce myself. I am Brenda Siegel, and I'm running for Lieutenant Governor. I have taught in our public schools at both dance, so art, and civic education. And I have had the opportunity as well of being adjunct professor in our school system. And I'm also a mom of a child who's choosing one of the state colleges. And so I really was quite astounded when I heard about the threatened closure, in large part because of the opportunity that would be taken away from many students, especially low-income students across our state. And in addition to that, my very deep understanding, because of the work I've done for the last 9 years, of the economic impact of that into the Northeast Kingdom, especially. And so we really, both of those factors really needed to see the light. And on top of that, the loss of 500 union jobs. So I really want to say before we get started that just throw a couple of facts at folks, and then we'll start talking a little bit about, for each of us, about what just happened here and where we think we need to go from here. So I'm just talking about NVU Linden, and NVU Linden, there is, it brings 18,000 visitors to that area every year. The economic impact is 113 million in northern Vermont of the state colleges. If you use a 2.5 multiplier. If you don't know what that is, that's okay. It's an economic term. So, but basically what it's saying is when to get the measurement of how much money comes in due to those colleges, that is how you get that number, a 2.5 multiplier. NVU Linden itself has 700 people employed, including 400 part-time, and as for payroll and benefits, it adds $32.7 million to our economy. I often talk about how important it is to not dictate what low-income students are allowed to learn. When we hear people talking about reimagining these schools, maybe making them more technical schools. I don't have a problem with technical school. I want that to be an option for people as well. However, we should not be dictating that poor kids are allowed to learn these subjects and everyone else gets to have the world be their oyster. And so I'm really clear that these schools are available for people to learn, as Brady did, as Adrian is, as Willow is, to be able to learn a wide breadth of information. And I think one thing that we need to do is stop dividing state colleges from public education, and commit to funding the whole public school system throughout our state, and make sure that everyone has access. So that is what I am fully committed to fight for, both as a candidate, and win or lose, I will be continuing. Anyone who knows me knows I will be continuing to fight that going forward, because I am passionate about this opportunity. I know that my son it would be very challenging for us to get through college if we did not have a state school option right now. He's choosing UVM, but that is a big stretch for us. So knowing that there's these other options and that was the best financial aid he got. So knowing that there's these other options is really important. So I am going to go in order of who I can see about what just happened and what we should do next. And so that for me right now is Adrian.
Thanks. Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute. I think, first of all, I watched the trustees meetings, and quite frankly, I was disgusted because several of them were not paying attention. One of them was actually falling asleep. And I tried to get it posted in the Caledonia Record, and I was told that they just had nothing to do with it. I think we need some more transparency, a lot more transparency in what is going on in the finances. NVU is vital to the communities that they serve, both Johnson and Linden. They give so much back, not just in the finances, but in the people that are there. We have some incredible professors. I know my restorative justice concentration, for one, is not offered anywhere else. And I don't see any commercials. I don't see any advertisements about it. We need to take these colleges and we need to push what they have unique about them. Not only community college, but Johnson, Castleton, NVU Linden, they each have their own unique strengths. And like you said, not everybody learns in the same way. Don't put everything online. Take what's strong about each college and push it. Because I was offered, when NVU was possibly going down, I was offered over $30,000 right off the bat from Norwich. They said, "Hey, we want you. We'll gladly, just be without even seeing your transcripts, we'll give you this money." And they said 30% of their students come from Florida. Now, this is a Vermont college. Why can't we turn around and get some of our students from out of state? I thankfully was able to turn them down and say, my professors are willing to work with me and they're going to stay open and they'll give me a custom degree that they can work with me and give me the classes I need. But I'm not the only one that's finding a lot of my classes are getting cut. And we need to reassure these students that, yeah, we're going to be here and you have the funding and you are going to have a school to come back to. And I know a lot of people are saying, like Jeb was saying, that the demographics are failing. They're not failing. We're just got kids running scared and kids thinking they're not going to have a school to come to or they're not going to have the finances to come to. And we need to find a way to make sure they understand that they do have the finances, they do have the school, and they do have the opportunity to come to school. I think once we have that, they'll flock there because we have the education for them. We have the professors. We have what it takes for them to come there, Brenda. We just need to show them that it's available and show them what we have to give them.
Thank you for that. Amen. I am now going to let Willow go.
All right. So I think, addressing the elephant in the room of what everybody has been looking at thus far. I think, everybody says we need more state funding, and that's true. I'm not saying we don't, because we definitely do. It's legally obligated, and the state has been breaking its own law for years in terms of, funding for this Vermont state colleges system. However, in the midst of this pandemic, is that possible is the real question. So I think we need to turn our focus more onto what can we do at our own level, what can we reduce at our own level so that we are still productive but also are saving money. But there are also some other things that turn back to the state, like how can we bring in more tax revenue? It's going to be the lowest that we've seen it in years, since 2008 probably, I would assume. So what can we do about that? And one of the things that I actually talked with Jacob Alpern about was the legal sale and taxation of marijuana. Marijuana is very popular in the state of Vermont. We have the highest usage rate in the entire country per capita. If we were to allow the legal sale and taxation of this, we could bring in so much tax money through this. I know there is a lot of opposition to this because not a lot of people necessarily agree with the recreational use of marijuana, but considering the fact that it is already technically legal, why not capitalize on that? It also, not only that, but it also takes a lot of the black market focus away, because a lot of the focus we have on the black market in Vermont is marijuana sales, because we can't technically legally sell it to the public yet. So a lot of that focus is on black market sales, is on the marijuana. I mean, obviously we do have other issues that we have within the black market, but it does take a lot of the focus and pressure off that black market. So not only are we benefiting our entire state in terms of taxes, we are also benefiting our entire state by kind of bringing people away from the black market and bringing it out of the light. So that was just one of the things that I talked about. But we also have to think about in our colleges, how can we reduce the amount of money that we use without interfering with the quality education that we need to give to people in order for people to come back. It's obvious that we need to give quality education and we need to give people opportunities if we want them to come. But how are we going to do so while also reducing funding? And I think that is all up to what we see within each college campus as a whole, because the VSC is not just NVU Linden, NVU Johnson, it's not just VTC, it is Castleton, it is VTC, it is CCV, it is everything. So where can we reduce funding on all campuses, I think is what we really need to focus on. because I know that there's a CCV St. Johnsbury that doesn't really get a lot of use. And of course, you know, it does have its virtues, but I think that there are some things that we can do to combine CCV with Linden in order to bring more money into both of those campuses. I think there are just so many things that we can do that people are overlooking because they are so hyper focused on state funding. There are more things that we can do, and I think that's one of the main things we need to let people know is there is so much more to do than to state funding.
Thanks, Willow. I'm pretty psyched about who's coming out of these colleges right now. So, yeah. I am going to now pass it over to Danny.
Hello. My perspective comes from the high school side, so I have less specific experience with the post-secondary education in Vermont, except that many of my students go there, come back from there. I've had friends that have very much benefited from and relied on that system. I have a friend who's a recent non-traditional student graduate of Castleton, and she never would have been able to consider college at all if it weren't for the public college system in Vermont. But Willow mentioned dual enrollment, and what I see, what impacts I think me the most, what I see the most, is the large number of Vermont students that benefit from the ability to take a couple of college classes while they're in high school and earn some credit, to save some money no matter where they go. And a very large percentage of our population may have the ability and the desire to go to college, but may view college as not for them. And the dual enrollment option levels that playing field so that we can, as you said, Brenda, not track our students into careers from an early age based on their parents' income, but let students choose their own path based on their abilities and their interests. And I have to take a longer term view. Public education is foundational to our democracy and our American values. Not only free K through 12 education, but access to higher education. And if we as a state hope to retain or draw back the students that we're graduating, a system of opportunities for them and for their future families is critical.
Thanks, Danny. And yes, the longer term view is what I think needs to happen. I think that kids need to know that they can go to college if that's what they're choosing. And one thing that we offer to some extent in Vermont is that option. My son also uses dual enrollment right now, or he's just finished all his classes, so he'll have 2 of his gen ed requirements completed going into college. And that's really important. I am now going to ask Gina the same question.
You know, I was hoping you were going to call on me, Brenda, because this is perfect timing, because there's sort of a segue, I think, between what I have to say and what Danny just said. And I'm going to come at this issue of the future of Vermont education, of the system, K-12 and higher ed, from sort of the side. So I want to use my time to pose some questions, and then hopefully together we can posit some answers. Before I do that, though, I want to ask everybody, and not just the panelists, but those who are listening in, to give yourselves and to give me the liberty to really think outside the box and to let go of what, might seem possible or impossible for a moment, and instead think about where we'd really like to go with education. So the first question that I want to ask is, what is the purpose of education? And it might seem like a simple question, but we don't all have the same answers. And when I say what is the purpose, emphasis on is now, I also want you to think about what should the purpose of education be. So the question both in the present and in the future, or the possible future. Next, and you're probably going to guess where I'm going to go here, is, does our present educational system actually achieve its goals, its stated mission, or not? And if not, how do we retool to get to where we really want to be? And then the final question is, instead of looking at COVID-19 as a challenge to our educational system, can we instead turn it around and look at it as an opportunity? And if so, what does that look like, and how might we take advantage of it? And I'm cognizant that I just threw out a bunch of questions with huge answers, and we could spend lots of time on any one single question. And of course, I've got all sorts of thoughts, but part of what I want to do is sort of open that door for all of us. And I'm gonna pass it back to you, Brenda.
Thanks, Gina. That was such a teacher move. So
Yeah, well, sorry, it's kind of ingrained after I don't know how many years.
So I ask questions when I'm presenting at forums, so I can't help myself either. And I think it's great because I think you learn a lot about what is needed, which is, I feel like, one of the most important roles of anybody doing any kind of presentation of any kind. So now I'd like to turn it over to Kate.
Hi there, thanks. I think, so it's kind of a moving target. So where information is and where information is coming from is constantly sort of changing. And I don't want anybody to think that like the colleges aren't engaging in these conversations, and even the board of trustees. So I got to listen in for 2 hours until my internet died, to the board of trustees meeting today. So I will say that there's, since I think the biggest
I think you're frozen. Kate, you're frozen. Okay, you know what we're gonna do?
what threw us the most, and what, am I coming through, or am I frozen again?
No, you're
Janet.
back. You're back again.
Just in time to curse. Okay, great. Yeah, the connection's been terrible today. Rain and Vermont internet don't seem to mix well, at least up here in Orleans County. So I know some of you can relate to that. So essentially, we've gotten some positive responses from our legislators in the weeks that we've been lobbying to say, hey, wait a second, we're really important to the state, and it's not just that we're benefiting individual students, but we benefit the whole state and our communities, and that support's great, but it really needs to shift from being crisis support, like, okay, we'll get you over this short little hump here, and grow into a longer term investment in affordable higher ed for all Vermonters. And that's what we really need to keep working on and pushing for, because education is, as everybody's saying here, it's a public good. It improves not only the individual standards of living, of existing in the world, but it really brings those benefits to our communities, and to our state and our country. God knows it could use some more education these days. But I mean, concretely, the institutions there, and we don't, the other good thing that's come out of this is, like, unification had always been sort of like, okay, I guess so. But this has really made us into one team. And so we don't really divide things and think about, oh, well, that's NVU Johnson and that's NVU Linden. So we've much more come together to be NVU as a whole, which, I mean, I think that makes us stronger going forward. We both have some incredible strengths and pretty complementary, I think. So I'm optimistic there. And we bring money to the areas, like the taxes we pay, our utility bills, everybody who has come from out of state. And I can think of, a dozen families at Linden alone who have come from out of state, have moved to work at the colleges, who buy homes, who have their children in the school systems. We serve on volunteer boards and select committees and just about everything. So the value that the institutions bring to the area is not just for the education of the students, but the benefits from that. And we have, in an area that doesn't have great of internet,
Your display.
Speed internet service. And we've reached out and done more partnerships with right. Frozen again?
Yes,
Really?
you are.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Darn it.
So you're back, sort of. Kate.
Okay.
Okay. So I am really glad to hear and show the display of internet troubles. I also have internet troubles at my house, and I think it is something that we are going to have to work on. So, yeah. So I am now going to introduce Brady as well.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to start out first. It's been brought up a little bit about the importance of liberal arts degrees. I think there's some confusion about a liberal arts degree and what that is. A liberal arts is not just necessarily an art degree. Liberal arts is interdisciplinary studies. So really taking an interdisciplinary look. And as someone with a liberal arts degree, studying psychology and business management at Johnson, when there was the uncertainty a couple weeks ago about whether or not I would be losing my job, I felt comfort in knowing that I had the ability to apply to jobs in many different sectors. And so, having that liberal arts degree really set me out to be able to look at different fields and not just feel like I needed to fall into one category. And so that was really comforting during those kind of stressful times. But I'm glad to be keeping my job. But as what we need to do, I think the funding is really important for many reasons, and especially when looking at MBU and now all of the institutions in the VSC need to be funded properly. But with MBU Johnson and Linden, a majority of our students at the Johnson campus and almost a majority at the Linden campus are Pell eligible, so low income students. And so when we look at our enrollment numbers, oftentimes the enrollment at these institutions are pointed out as reasons why they should consolidate and reasons why they should close in this last couple of weeks. But really, if we think about the fact that our funding has just not been there and it hasn't been there for close to 3 decades, it's not surprising that our tuition has increased, which causes our low income students who we are predominantly serving to either not be able to get to us in the first place, or B, they're not able to stay enrolled. So by increasing our funding, we're not only going to be increasing our enrollment and battling those demographic challenges that people keep throwing out as reasons why we need to consolidate, but we're also going to retain more of our students who want to be there, but who come into my office on a weekly basis talking about how they need to figure out the best way to be able to afford their education. And unfortunately, for many of them, they're not able to figure that out. So our funding needs to be our priority. I learned at Johnson that a budget is a list of priorities, and so when we talk about our funding, we need to put ourselves up on that list. Every year, I look at town meeting day and hear about the school budgets that are being passed overwhelmingly against all these financial struggles that our towns are facing, which indicates that Vermonters are willing to support education. And I don't think that that means that they're just supporting education K through 12. Vermonters aren't saying, 12th grade, that's enough, you're educated, we're not going to support you. And I think with the public outcry that we've seen over the last couple weeks, is that it really does showcase that we are wanting as a state to fund not just through the 12th grade. So I think it needs to be a priority. We need the legislators to not just talk about bridge funding. It's important to get that and secure that for the time being, but we need to start talking about funding long term in order for us to be successful. And again, thinking about an investment. I would come from a very fortunate family that was able to support me, and I was able to concentrate on my academics. And by doing well in high school, I was able to attend Johnson on a full scholarship for tuition. And because of that, I graduated debt free. I was able to afford going to graduate school out of state. And then I came back and I'm now working at Johnson. I bought a house and my plan is to stay in state. And so, an affordable education, just from my example, indicates that, for myself, I wanted to be here and I'm able to be here now because of having an affordable education. So I think funding it's important that our schools look at what we need to do and to save money when necessary. And I'm glad that NVU has this advisory committee that they is starting tomorrow to look at that. But our priority right now is securing funding that we've been needing.
I love that you brought up our town meetings and our school budgets. I think the Act 46 has caused some issues with school budgets not being passing right now. And that's not because people don't want to fund education. It's because it's not working in the way that it's impacting some communities. And so we are going to have to go in and look at what we have done and how we can fix that. But I think when we're doing that, we could probably look at the entire system. I think we need to look at the entire system from pre-K through college. I now would like to introduce Martha Allen.
Thank you, Brenda. I'm going to look at this from a little different perspective. I totally support a lot of what folks have said so far as the value of our state college system and all of the benefits. And Brady, I think you're kind of the poster person where you went to school here, went away, came back, and that's what you, as a mom, you hope if your kids go away, they come back. I have two sons. One is in Vermont. The other one he's looking, he wants to come back. So hopefully they will. But the way I want to look at this is over the years, we hear again and again, oh, that's the other thing. Being a union advocate and a public school teacher, I've spent my entire career fighting to have good wages and benefits for public school educators. And yes, it's been pre-K 12 mostly, but we've always been wanting to support the higher ed state college system also. So anyway, you look at what's happening. We've got declining enrollment. It's been going down and down over the years. You look at all the projections and we're getting older and older. The good news is we're getting older. The bad news is we're getting older. So what we need to do here, in my mind, is try to figure a way to keep, instead of wringing our hands. I feel like the legislature goes through a hand wringing exercise every year. Woe is us. We don't have enough money. What are we going to cut? Because we don't have any. The projections say we aren't going to have any young people here. So I think what we should do is the state college system is so struggling. Yes, we need better revenue. We can't do it in the same way we've been doing it, even if we started to fund it the way the legislature should be. That's still not enough. The challenges are astronomical. My suggestion is we look at a way to revitalize the state and encourage people to move here with children. How do you get people to move to Vermont? I think COVID might be helpful. I know my son in Boston wants to get away from that petri dish as fast as he can. But COVID aside, people will not move to a rural area and young people if they don't have high-speed internet. That's just they just won't. So number one, we have to take bold steps, and hopefully with Congressman Welch and the federal support for high-speed internet, that will help to get us move along that road. Number two, families aren't going to come if they don't have quality childcare. I think what we should do is use our state college system in the Northeast Kingdom. We'll speak to Linden in particular for me, and use that, diversify what happens on that campus. Yes, have the college piece, but have some incubator business opportunities up there. Put childcare in there. Put veterans programs. There's space. I know there's space in these schools to be able to diversify the revenue. Have federal funding for veterans, and have federal funding for daycare, and local businesses start to work on businesses. So our campuses turn into community schools, which is kind of what I've been wanting to do with our elementary schools in small towns. So our small towns don't dry up because they don't have an elementary school. If you put in health services and childcare from 6 weeks up, put into our public schools, including our higher ed, I think that that's a way to encourage, entice young folks from out of state. If we don't get more people moving in here, all this conversation we're having is moot. If we can't do this on our own, the writing's been on the wall for ages. We've had the hand wringing goes on all together, and we know people support public education, as was mentioned. People voted in, but they do it, they grumble, oh my taxes, and it's understandable. And we have a lot of people on fixed income with our older folks. So I think that we really need to look at things from a different perspective as to how to fund this. Keep our academics going, keep our colleges that piece, but use that the facilities to expand and bring in other sources of revenue. There you go.
I'm really appreciating all these perspectives and this conversation. And I know that I have been advocating for some time for us to, I think we lost Kate by accident. Hopefully she'll come back. I've been advocating for some time that we use our small schools also as bringing some of those services to the center of our communities, which would help us to keep them open and to not ruin the economic centers of our communities and the school systems. I now would love to welcome Coach to this part of the conversation. And everyone who's asking questions, we're going to get to you in just a minute. That's what's up next.
Well, thank you. I think there's a lot of points that are well made and well taken. And I think that not just to make it sound like, oh, that's great, let's just do it all. But in actuality, there's pieces to every single question that was raised. And there's results that prove that they've worked. If you look at dual enrollment, the committee that put that together, and Martha remembers sitting before our ed committee for a number of months to help us get that together. We passed that together, okay, for Vermonters. I think that when we look at resolving some of these problems, it's just a matter of us having the collective will to do it. Okay, the examples speak for themselves. I had the opportunity and honor to be a educator from a lot of different venues, both as a classroom teacher and as a school administrator. And to Martha's point earlier on, the experiments that we worked on, and I think education in itself is an experiment. So as long as we don't say, yep, it's a box, we put everybody in the box and this is the way it has to work. No, it's an experiment. It's an opportunity to grow our kids. And in order to help them grow, the system has to be as flexible as they are. So that being said, I think about some of the things that were milestones that are still applicable if we decided to use them. Uh, we had students, and this will give you a pretty clear idea, and I know a number of you will remember these examples. Willow's discussion about dual enrollment. Part of the reason why we pushed that so hard, and it was going to happen, was that when students came before us with their parents before that committee and said, what if I don't want to go to college? I'm not sure. To be able to have that opportunity to let them sample that experience and then go, oh wow, this is kind of cool, and I can do it. That's where we saw the excitement, as a legislature, and I was feeling pretty cool about it just because, I feel that's the way kids should, and adults too should have that opportunity. um, when I was a tech center director, one of the things that we did was we experimented with an academy model. And basically what it did was it would allow a high school student to leave high school with up to 14 college credits. Now, if that isn't a revenue generator for families and making it, more equitable for especially our disenfranchised Vermonters that might not have the wherewithal to be involved in post-secondary, but to be able to get it done on their way through the process. Those are the types of opportunities. And we forget about those good things that we've done with our system along the way. Uh, uh, I think everybody that has been speaking, I like to think of best practice as an educator. And it's not like I create these new things. Some of the coolest things that I did in a classroom were borrowed from other educators because they worked and they were good and they were exciting and they kept my kids excited. So that's what it's really about, I think. And so what that tells me about part of our problem with all of this, leadership. Okay. We have a leadership drought here in Vermont. If we look at every level, okay, we see it. Um, what there right now, I think there's 9 of the um, 9 of the 44, 45 superintendents right now are not gonna be here next season, and that's what we know so far. There might even be more transitioning for whatever reason. but but those types of shifts on a continual basis, and then let alone what's happening within the schools as far as building leadership. um, so what it's done is it falls back on the classroom teachers to kind of pick up that extra load even and maintain structure enough to keep the system going, and that's what happens. And so um, that's part of this continuum, and I think it's part of the discussion that we need to talk about. Gina started to mention it a little bit when she was talking about professional development, and that component. um, the better that uh, system is, the stronger the opportunities are for our kids and our uh, and our students in general at every age. So That's just kind of a quick overview of where I'm at, and hopefully we can get some resolution, with that. Um, as far as the finance, piece goes, uh, we've been afraid to take that deep dive, I think, and that's been pretty evident, at least for the last 5-6 years, at least. Uh, what do you hear every time you talk to uh, uh, a taxpayer, let's say? And what they'll say to you is, you got to do something about my property tax. and and even my wife just said that again. Uh, and that being said, we have a problem, and we know we do, and we haven't addressed it. That's like driving around, with a flat tire, and then you put a plug in it, and you drive around some more, and then it goes flat again, and then you wonder what's going on, and you never fix the tire. And it's not necessarily about getting a new one. You might just not have fixed it. Um, so I think the analogy here is that, we need to take an overhaul, on the financial structure of education in Vermont. And that's pre-K, through college. And I think that the the money is there. We just haven't allocated it well and looked at it in a cohesive way, I think. So my 2 cents.
Thank you, Coach. And I want to just piggyback on that and just say that anyone who struggled financially, as I think it's pretty well known that I have and do, and knows that we're spending a lot of money not fixing our problems regularly. If you're in poverty, you know that. All right, we spend a lot of money not fixing our problems, and that's not like unique to an individual family or an individual person. That's true in our state as well. When we don't solve our problems, we spend a lot of money, and we're doing that right now by not solving some of these problems with education across the board, from pre-K all the way on up. And I think if we don't look at it as a whole, then we end up in some problematic territory that we just saw happen, right? And we have to commit to it, and we have to commit to fighting for it. I am going to take a question now, and of course, we're not all going to answer all of the questions, so we're going to check in with folks and just let people know, if you want to answer the question, maybe just give me a little raise your hand, and we will do it that way. And I want to just say that my Jacob is probably is telling me right now that I need to put a donation plug in. So I just want to let you all know that if you donate to my campaign, I am going to be fighting these issues all along. So it felt a little awkward right here, so I thought I'd just be honest about why I was doing it right now. So so I appreciate all of you working with me on that. Fundraising is really hard during COVID, so if you're able and comfortable, please do donate. Okay, now, first question came from, I'm starting with Q&A, and then I'm going back to the chat because the chat is longer. So the first question is from Michael Stern, and he says, how can we consolidate state colleges? How can we consolidate state colleges with community colleges and the University of Vermont? He said this before any of us were talking, so I know some people talked about this, but Boston University has many constituent colleges. Why not organize higher education as Vermont University with constituent colleges? I have mixed feelings about this, but does anyone want to answer that question? Does anybody want to answer that question right now? Gina, take it away.
Thanks, Brenda. I'm just going to answer a little snippet of it. So a number of the colleges, let's see, well, certainly CCV, Castleton, and NVU have online programs. I don't know about VTC. CCV's online program is by far the largest, and they've been doing it the longest time. I think it's probably the best overall. And I have long thought that we should have a basically Vermont State College online, and rather than having 3 or 4 different online programs. Have one, do it well. And I'm not saying get rid of any faculty. I teach online, so that's my one little snippet. And then you could transfer the credits. It's wherever. It's all part of Vermont State Colleges.
Willow.
Yeah. So I actually kind of touched on this when I was speaking earlier, but I've been thinking a lot about this too, is the consolidation of CCV. And I don't necessarily think it's a matter of consolidating to UVM. I think it's a matter of consolidating CCV as a whole. One, our previous Chancellor Jeb Spalding cited that a lot of in terms of where we were seeing debt, was that we were seeing debt in brick and mortar. Now, NVU Linden is sandwiched in between 2 online CCV campuses. And he complained a lot about how online versus brick and mortar was a competition. And you can't really complain about that when you sandwich a school that is brick and mortar, mainly brick and mortar. We do have online stuff, but mainly brick and mortar between 2 online campuses. So I think it's a matter of consolidating where we don't, because I mean, it's well known in the Northeast Kingdom in general, we don't have great internet. It's been it's been seen in this very meeting. I've never, like my entire life, I've never had great internet. I live in the state forest. It's never been great. So I think when we consolidate the campuses that aren't necessarily being used as much, for example, CCV St. Johnsbury, I feel like if we consolidate CCV St. Johnsbury and CCV Newport, or consolidate it to the other state colleges rather than to UVM, I feel like that could solve a lot of our problem. If we allow students from CCV St. Johnsbury to go onto Linden's campus and maybe even use brick and mortar space, it allows them to have access to reliable internet, and they can have that college experience that a lot of people, especially young people, are craving. That seems like something that could be very, very intriguing to someone who is my age. I mean, I think I'm here, so I think I can, speak to that level. Is a lot of us don't want to go to community college because even if they can afford it, because they don't have that experience, So I feel like consolidation in terms of CCV shouldn't be focused towards UVM, but other VSC campuses. So I think that's something that we should definitely consider.
I see that 2 more people want to answer this question. I'm going to add a second question in there, and then you can see if you can, just because there's a lot of questions have come in, so I'm trying to figure out how we're going to get to all of them. I'm so excited that people are really wanting to ask a lot of questions, and I'm hoping to get as many as I can. And I want to just say that I know that some people choose which school and which campus they go to because that's where their family is. So I also am really cognizant of that when we're talking about any kind of consolidation. So online might be different, other versions might be different, but just making sure that that we aren't taking away that opportunity. So this cat is really being part of this event right now. So I am going to ask what Asher Edelson asks: how will we protect programs like Quantum Leap in Bennington and help to ensure bright futures for kids with disabilities and learning obstacles? So that, of course, goes in the same sort of category of making sure that everybody has access. So I know that that's a little bit, definitely a different question, but I think it does, when we're talking about consolidation, also talking about how we protect these programs that are very localized to certain areas and need to be. That's in there as well. I don't know if that still makes Brady want to answer right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know much about the Quantum Leap program, but again, with being accessible, I think going back to the last question about looking at the UVM and consolidation and kind of looking at it as a whole, like that's something that the state needs to examine. I know they've examined in the past, as recently as even less than 10 years ago. And so, if it becomes a way of saving money across the board, but again, I think going into the second question, it's making sure that we preserve the essence of the campuses that we have. So making sure that if we do combine in a way so that we are more cost effective across the state, it's also making sure that we're not losing what the core of each of these programs. So not losing the uniqueness. So down in Bennington, I would assume that there's a connection there. So making sure that something like that, which is extremely important for accessing higher education, is intact. And then really looking at, maybe not using consolidation, but thinking about the CCV sites is like relocating. So make it like trying to see if that would cut off access if they relocated, and if not, for example, the Morrisville Johnson, not diminishing the experiences for either CCV or MVU students, but enhancing them. So if we could get kind of collaboration going on a campus site, we would actually offer more benefits to both CCV students and MVU students if possible. But it needs to be looked at carefully. And again, decisions I don't think can be made immediately. So we need to take some time looking at the best options.
Thank you. And now Adrienne would like to answer as well.
Like Brady, I'm not familiar with the Quantum Leap program, but I do have a son that has some special needs. He has an IEP. And I know that we do have a young lady at Linden that has medical needs where she has to have special access. And going back to the other question of bringing CCV into the fold, I think that would be an excellent idea because they do have certain areas that are literally right next to brick and mortar. And if they brought them in, I think our programs and our staff that do take care of the special needs and the IEPs and the 504s, I think they do an excellent job. There are students that offer tutoring. There are students that offer special help and stuff. And I'll be honest, when I first got there was this young man that I have no idea who he was. I never met him till the second semester. And he would come up to me every day and say, "How are you doing, miss? How are you, miss? Have a good day, miss." He made me feel so wonderful. And I caught him one day. I said, "You don't know me from Adam, but I said, you are the sweetest young man." I said, "Every time I see you, you're always saying hello to somebody." And I said, "I wouldn't even know you made my day." And he did it to everybody. And I think the students there are so accepting that it would actually make a benefit to someone who has special needs to be in such an accepting environment. I'm sure the other colleges are probably just the same as Linden because the students, it's been my experience with my son that the more people that accept him for who he is and care about him for who he is, the better off he is. And I've seen, like I said, the support and the accommodations that they're willing to give would only help these students and benefit them in the long run.
Okay, before we go on to the next subject, does anybody know anything about the Quantum Leap program so that we can answer that question? Do we have anybody? So I also am from this area, but not Bennington. And I don't know a lot about it, but now I've written it down and now I'm going to research it and definitely get back to you. But I think that one thing that I want to say is that when we're looking at this, we have an equity issue across the board from pre-K on up. Whether it is needing to really implement an ethnic studies standard into our schools, even though it's passed, we need to implement it. Whether it is making sure that everybody has equal access to the internet, so that when the next disaster that's definitely waiting in the wings right now comes up, we can all have equal access to education, which of course is a right that we have. So I would say that in not knowing anything about it, but from your description, Asher, I would say that we have to preserve that. and protect programs like that, because otherwise we are taking away that equal access. So I have looked it up. I have written it down and I have started, and I am definitely going to be looking it up, because that is something that we should not have a panel and not be able to answer. And so I regret not putting someone on the panel that would be able to answer a question like that as well, in addition. And so I'm going to make sure to get that answer for you. And next, we have a question from Emily Wood, and she says, as an NVU student, external degree, not presently enrolled in class, I do not know what I would do if NVU was closed. I have an associate's degree from CCV. One more class is left for me to get a BA in professional studies from NVU. The glitch is finances, and being a cancer patient, what can be done for disabled cancer students in the midst of a pandemic to be able to financially continue education? All individuals deserve an education, and disabled or sick or not, I cannot complete the last class till after healing enough for my next cancer surgery. Thank you, Emily Wood, for sharing your story. And I have to say, I have to bring universal healthcare plug in here, because that is something that we absolutely need in order to get to a place where where these complications don't intersect with finances, for one thing. But then still, when education costs so much, to have both of those butting heads is unbelievable, and when both should be accessible to all. And so I just want to name that. And is there anyone that would like to take, and I want to name that coming out of high school too, because I know I had students who had cancer, and so their grades may have been a bit lower for a semester, because we don't have a really great system necessarily in all of our schools for addressing that. And so their educational opportunity going forward also was different than other students. And so we really have not, with full breadth, addressed that issue overall, where medical care intersects with finances and education throughout your secondary school and throughout college. Does anyone else want to answer that? I almost thought Martha was raising her hand. No, okay. Yeah, it's a really tough.
Something. I'll just speak to it. I think that we're in a new world here, and I feel really badly for the person who just asked that question. But now with COVID, there are many people who want to continue at school, and we just really don't know what the landscape's going to be for that, as far as having all of our students and faculty in the brick and mortar schools be safe. Opening college in the fall with dorms and cafeterias, and I mean, I don't know, I'm paranoid just going to the grocery store with my mask on. So it's going to be a challenge, and the people who are struggling with cancer and other ailments and problems that make them more susceptible, we've got to come up with something. I suppose online is about the only thing that they can do if they're able. Once again, we need internet. There may be people who are struggling health-wise and don't have internet that is going to be able to work for them while they do their studies from home. So it's a challenge.
Thank you, Martha. All roads lead back to internet. I think we're seeing that tonight here anyways, but all roads really lead back to internet. And I know that some districts are coming up with a communication district, and it's necessary right now, but it's not the long-term solution. That's like the kind of the short-term answer right now. But we do need to have broadband, and we really do need to have broadband. Not to echo my former opponent, but we do need broadband in every corner of this state, and it's really really important that we put that at the forefront of education from pre-K on up, because otherwise we are just failing our students. Um, Coach.
Um, Taking us back to the uh, broader discussion, not just about healthcare, but also education. And it did back to uh, communication and being able to reach folks. So that is connectivity. And we have already how much it would cost to give that kind of quality of technology to everyone in Vermont. I'm gonna say what I said about our education problem. It's going to take collective will. You know, how important is this to us? If we're going to do telemedicine, for example, how are we going to connect, with the patient if we're going to do telemedicine? I mean, I had an appointment a couple of weeks ago, uh, with my doc, and we were able to at least Skype and have, a good session. And at least I felt comfortable about it. And I guess he felt I was okay. So I guess I'm okay. I mean, it isn't the answer to everything at the moment, but as technology and the ability to expand that technology gets better, there's more we can do. And from an educational perspective, and this kind of goes back to that earlier question around, um, how do we create a system that works for all Vermonters? Well, I think you already answered the question. It has to be a system. Okay. And when I think of a system, it's cohesive. And what that means is if I'm in Bennington, it doesn't matter that I'm going to NVU. I should be able to take my classes and be part of the NVU community and not have it seem like I'm restricted from doing that. And that answers that question about the lady who wants to finish her degree. There should be no restrictions on her finishing her degree. We should be able to find a way to help her finish her degree. It's that simple. If we are taking care of all of our students, we're taking care of all of our students. She is a student. Our responsibility is to take care of her. So, let's stop playing freaking games, excuse me, around, well, it's the sister, it's the book. No, okay, calm down. Um, I really believe we can find, those answers are there, and it's not uh, as insurmountable, I think, as people like to try to make it seem. I look around, just on the screen right now, and there are some really cool people on this panel and on this discussion. And anything we decide we want to challenge as Vermonters, we can. And I firmly believe that. Okay. And I'm not being naive. I've seen us do some crazy stuff. So anyways, that's just my thought.
I just want to say that we all know that I believe that anything we want to do and challenge we can, and I think it's really important to fight hard for those things. I want to bring another question to the table, and I do want to echo when I'm doing this. I want to echo that it is about all students, and I very much worry uh, about the way that we have not served all students as a whole. So when I think about, I saw a question come in about what about making more online classes and then having only bringing people in for the weekends. The problem with that for me is that it doesn't serve all students, not with the system we have right now. And you'll often find me saying that this system is people made, and people made problems can be people fixed, and we can fix this problem. So we must. And so, Matt, this happened way back in the beginning, but how would you diversify the state economy and make sure that our farmers are able to succeed? I'm not sure if that is education related in our system, but Willow has an answer, and so we're going to let her answer.
So, yeah, so it took me a second to figure out what I think he's saying, but what I think he's saying is he's talking about, agricultural programs that are available at the VSCS campuses, and I believe he's talking specifically about VTC. And I don't know if I'm the best VTC advocate because I don't go to VTC, but he can obviously correct me if I'm wrong because I could be interpreting this completely incorrectly. But I think in order to, help the farm state of Vermont, we need to keep our agricultural programs strong. We need to be able to have that the accessibility for these students. And I think with better education and agricultural programs, we find sustainability in future farmers. And I think, obviously there are different like state levels at which this farmers could be more supported. And that's a whole different conversation. But I think to start, education is kind of the door to everything. I feel like a lot of people fail to education is the everything. It is what leads us to a better economy. It's what leads us to an emptier jail system. It's what leads us to less poverty. It's what leads us to everything. It literally leads us to our future. So I think everything begins at education. And I think the bettering of our agricultural programs and protecting those programs is a start to what we need to help protect our farmers. And like I said earlier, whatever happens beyond that is a different discussion, I think. But I think where we look at it from an education perspective is simply just protecting those programs and protecting those schools that offer those programs because they're vital to Vermont, especially because we see that a lot of the revenue in Vermont is from dairy farms. We see that. We know that. You don't have to live in Vermont your whole life to know that. There's cows everywhere. Like there's more cows than people, like, so I think it all starts at education. And I think that's just kind of where we need to put our focus on in terms of agriculture and education, where that connects. Beyond that, I don't really know how to answer that question.
Okay, Adrian would like to answer that question, and then I'm really excited about the next question, so I'm ready to go. Go ahead, Adrian.
Well, I just would like to piggyback off what Willow said. I know when I was growing up, I'm sure Coach remembers this, we used to have Future Farmers of America. And I don't know a lot about VTC, but I do know, like I said, to piggyback off what Willow said, as far as funding goes, we need to emphasize to the legislature that education is where everything starts. We have a school to prison pipeline. We can change everything in our state if we start with education. We can help our farmers become sustainable. We can help our prisons get smaller, get emptier. We can help everything if we start with education. And if we bring back programs like the FFA and the technical programs and things like that, I think that there are a lot of kids that, yeah, they want to go to school, but they want to go to school because they have new ideas about what will help the farming system today. And I think, she's absolutely right. We need to be able to provide systems for them to be able to do that. And we are a farming community here, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of, and we should provide them with those opportunities.
Thank you. I'm so glad there are people that could answer that question. So I want to just say that this next question is, I think, at the heart of a lot of what I really think about when I'm thinking about running, when I'm thinking about in general advocacy for my students. But it starts with a healthcare question. I'm actually going to say the second part of the question, which is that once students who face more adversity can access higher levels of education or or their education at all at this point, how do we address the inequities that some student populations face, and um, what supports can we provide to ensure that they receive their best chance for success? And then Asher actually piggybacked off of that, so I'm going to add it. Asher said also, how will we protect programs of so it's a quantum leap thing again. So I think that that's a really great question, the quantum leap, and I'm now going to never forget what it is. But I do want to just say that that just personally, what I want to say is that this comes to the heart to me of not just higher education, but education as a whole. That when we are not serving our entire student population as whole people, as whole students, and including their families often, then we are not actually they're not actually getting equal education, because not all students are addressing the same thing. This comes up for me a lot of times. When I'm talking about, for example, minimum wage, when we talk about high school students having jobs. Well, my son has a job because he helps um, pay for things that other parents can afford. And so I do think that he deserves a livable wage, because he's having to manage school and a job because that's what he has to do, not because he's trying to get some extra experience for later in life, like would be wonderful was true for all students, but it's not. And so I think that they're in healthcare and all kinds of equity issues that come up from education all the way from pre-K all on up. So I would love to hear from some of our public school teachers on this as well. And of course, we'll bring the cats really are enjoying this panel all across the board. So I'd love to hear from some of our public school teachers on this, because I do think that you all see this a lot as you're teaching and in your careers. Danny.
Yeah, I think the first thing is we can't fix a problem unless we talk about a problem. Non-traditional students and students with disabilities often feel unserved and invisible in a system that is designed by able people who fit a certain mold for other able people. And I think K through 12 education, at least in my area, has made really great leaps in accessibility. And I think we as a state, with Act 77, if I have the number right, creating alternative pathways to graduation for students, has done wonders to really begin to serve students that a few years ago would have just dropped out. Education is becoming for all, but it is becoming for all because we are willing to say, how can we be better, but also engage with students. Like, what do you need? What are your goals, and how can we help you meet them? It's been a long time since I was in post-secondary education, but I was teaching in a nursing program that was made up entirely of non-traditional students. It was in an urban setting. It wasn't in Vermont, but it was all people in their 30s and 40s, all women, single moms, just trying to kind of go back to school, make a better life for their families. It worked for them, and they had a lot of success because there was recognition in this community college, that here was a population of students that needed different supports from others, and accommodations were made. We approached, I think, as I'm very bad with names, and now I don't see her. She must have disconnected. Um, Another
Hey,
panelist. Oh, Gina. Yeah, the
Oh,
picture changed.
oh, Gina.
Yeah, Gina challenged us to think about, what is our goal? Are we meeting that goal? And how can we meet um, how can we meet certain goals better? So I think we should take some of our lessons learned from K through 12 and see how we can project them forward, and actively solicit student participation in these conversations. Ask students, where are you not being heard? What challenges do you face that your peers do not face? To try and level some of those playing fields.
And then I want to say, believe them, because I think that there's a huge, I mean, I experienced this. I've talked about this on other panels Coach has been on, so he won't get offended. I've experienced this in the legislature, where I feel like I'm telling a story that is an experience I've had. It's the real thing I've happened to my family. And they're like, thanks for your story. And then we move on and nothing changes in that bill, or nothing changes. And so that's not listening. That's not hearing. It might be listening, but it's not hearing. And so I think that we want to include students, and then we want to believe them that those are the challenges that they have, and not doubt everything everyone says. I wonder if Martha wants to talk about that question at all. I know you've talked about equity a lot in education, and I really want to hear what you have to say right now.
Well, as this was being brought up, I was just thinking of our work with racial equity work at Vermont NEA, and we had a task force and brought students in to work with us about how to bring racial equity work into how to educate teachers and staff about racial equity and bias and racism. And the best advice we got came from students who were on that task force. They were phenomenal. And it just makes so much sense to listen to the people who are right in the system, who are sponges. They just want to learn and do. And when they come up against a block, some kind of a roadblock, an obstacle of some sort, they speak out and identify it. And it's up to the adults to make those changes. But on the other side of this is the whole mess of federal funding and the rules and the the things that have to be done in order to receive federal funding, where you get to balance, is it worth the federal funding to get that money? In order to, we have to do this if we want this money. Do we really want to be doing this? There's that that trade-off. We have to take federal funding. We're way too small. We can't be doing this on our own. So hopefully with a new administration in November, next January, a new administration, maybe we will change the Secretary of Education at the federal level, who might be able to be more aware of kids and students and their needs in this time. So I really think that listening to kids is key here. And it's this new world of online, and we're going to have some kind of a bifurcated system. It's not going to go back to the way it was. I just don't think it will. So we should be listening to kids to see how to do this in a different way, but the most beneficial to them. I rambled.
You did not ramble. It was an excellent answer. So I just want to welcome Kate. Is her internet? I want to just let you all know that her internet did not work, and she couldn't get back on as a result. However, she is on the phone, and she can't be elevated to panelist, so we can't see her. However, she can talk right now, so I'm gonna let her say hello.
Hi there. Finally back via phone. Hopefully that's a better connection than my internet was this evening.
And I'm really glad you're back because I want to ask you a question. And I want to ask you about the impact on staff at when we, not just the threat, not just the action um, of closing schools, but the threat of it. And what you think, how are we going to make sure that we don't take action in the way that we did, and why not? Why shouldn't we do it as a surprise everyone, you don't have a college or a job? So why
Well, hopefully why not to do that is fairly obvious at this point, and it's kind of that saying, if you can't be a good example, at least you can serve as a horrible warning. So I think that's kind of where we are on that one. So how do we prevent that? And we've been reaching out and trying to work more closely with the Board of Trustees. We've been very open in our interest in speaking with them, and I'm saying we, meaning the staff unions. Especially, we've been working very closely with the faculty union, and both staff unions have been working together and saying, hey, we're available, like, use us, and how can we help, and what can we do? And we've been trying to do that with our with mixed results on our local administration, but it is really stressful for folks. And the day that bomb was dropped on us, April 17th, there was a lot of panic. There was a lot of crying, and a lot of people going, "Oh my God, what does this mean for my family? What does this mean for everything that I've built here?" And so we definitely want to avoid that and have it be a joint conversation. And I think the new leadership at the chancellor's office, the interim chancellor, Zadatny, she's been a pretty good partner with us in her role as general counsel, and she has been open to conversations. So I feel like that's probably not going to happen again. I think they've seen what happens when it does, and they did not like it. So everybody who called and wrote and showed up honking horns in support, thank you, because that's what made the difference. And I think we have to all kind of stick together and not start looking in different people's bowls and saying, well, his is more full than mine. And I think we all need to work together to make sure that everybody really gets what they need to go forward.
That was a great answer, Kate. I think that is what we need. And I want to ask one last question. And this is our last question. Then we're each going to have a minute to close and wrap up. We have a hard stop at 9. So because the person producing, Carrie, has another show at 9:05. So I just wanted, the question I want to ask is on the I kind of outlined the economic impact a little on the Northeast Kingdom. So of these closures, but I also want to roll that into the economic impact when small schools close in the Northeast Kingdom, for our public schools as well. So we aren't going to have a lot of time to answer the question. I'll probably stop us in about 5 minutes, but we're going to have Brady go first because Brady raised his hand first. Such a tinker too.
Yeah, so I think that the impact on the local schools will be huge in several different ways. And one way that maybe not many people have thought about is that NVU, Johnson, and Linden supply a lot of the educators for our public schools in the Northern Tier. And actually, I got this fact that in the Lamoille North Supervisory District, 41% of the licensed educators graduated from one of the NVU campuses. So if we get, if we don't value these institutions and we don't continue on these work, especially with licensing our educators, we're going to lose a significant portion of our public educators, and particularly the Northern Tier, which will be really devastating for the public school system and the K through 12 level.
Willow.
Yeah, so I come from a really, really small high school, like I mentioned earlier, and I think it was just last year where there was talks of shutting just my high school down. And so I know the impact it has on a community when not just a college, but any school is shut down. There was a lot of consolidation last year of high school, and my high school was one of the ones that they kind of looked at to consolidate, and thankfully they didn't. But when this happened at the NVU level, I kind of was just like, oh, here we again. It's just like, I can't believe it. But in terms of economic impact, at my high school, I can think of count more teachers than I can count on my two hands that went and graduated from Linden. Linden specifically, but from both NVUs as well. And as an early college advocate, I feel like I have to bring this up. I know that with the closure of these schools comes the impact that there will really not be a lot of accessible options for early college in the Northeast Kingdom or in Orange, if we're talking about VAST. And so with the closure of these schools, you're also taking away the opportunity for potential high school, not only high school seniors, but high schoolers in general to go and be able to afford that education, and they just won't go. So for me personally, I know I'm not the only one who's like this, but if I had not done full-time dual enrollment my junior year and then early college my senior year, I would not have been able to go to college at all, because that was it. It was either I get these credits for free or I don't go. That's the fine line between who gets to go and who doesn't get to go. In many cases, it's not just me. I see these students every day. I see them walk the halls. I see them go home and not be able to eat dinner because there's no food in the house. You know, I see these students all the time. And I'm sure all of my high school teachers in here know exactly what I'm talking about. They know exactly what I'm talking about when I say these students, there's just a fine line between who can go and who can't. And when you eliminate these options, you can't complain about the retention rates when kids go to college. A lot of, like, the big thing is like, hey, these students aren't going to college. Well, why do you think? They can't afford it, especially students in the NEK. And I think, I don't know it off the top of my head, but the free and reduced lunch rate average in the NEK is over 50%. Of the entire NEK, all of the schools, it's over 50%. And in Orange County, it's a little over 40%. So I think that just speaks levels about the economic impact this will have. All of these students who can't go will know, like, they won't be able to contribute to the economy at a level that they would have before. It's basic economics that a lot of people are missing, is that if you don't have these college graduates, sure, they might go and work somewhere else, but they will probably not be able to contribute to the economy to the extent that they would have had they not gone to a technical school or arts college. They just simply won't. It's just, you don't really, you know, obviously there's some kids who get an apprenticeship and, you know, make a lot of money, but that's very rare. I don't really know a lot of students who like excessively produce for the economy if they have not graduated from college or even have attended college at all. So it's very important that we allow this education to these students, because otherwise we just wouldn't be able to, like, we just wouldn't be able to sustain ourselves in the NEK economically. We just lose so many jobs and we lose so many students going to school. It's just, what do you do after that?
Thank you. And I want to just echo what you're saying. I have a big frustration. We cannot complain about the demographic crisis and not solve the problems that would keep our students here and or bring them back here for jobs, like Brady came back here. And I think that everyone on the panel has really outlined that exact issue, which is that if we are serious about solving this problem, then we have to be willing to make the strategic investment to do so. And so with that said, I'm going to ask each of you to just, I don't want us to get cut off. So I want to ask each of you to just wrap up, tell me what your thoughts are coming from this panel and what you think, if you had one call to action for people to do, and Jacob will write them down, and people who are watching, attending, or interested or watched at any point tonight will get, if they signed in, they will get those calls to action in their inbox. So I am going to go ahead and I'm not going to put, you know what I am. I'm going to put you on the spot, Adrian. You can go first.
I guess I would just say, like I echoed earlier, just make sure you start echoing the strengths that each college has, because we have some fantastic professors. As I said, Dr. Stroop at NYU Linden, he is the only one that is qualified to teach restorative justice. He is outspoken, he is brassy, and he is very intelligent. And I'm so lucky to have him as my professor. And he'll put it right out there. He is very smart, and he'll tell you like it is. He'll tell you the statistics. He knows what's going on, and he's told us flat out, this is what you need to do, and you need to stand up for it. And I'll be honest, I got the nads to do it, so that's why I'm here. You've got to stand up for what you believe in. Coach is right. We're Vermonters. We can do anything, and don't back down.
Thank you, Adrian. Amen. Now I'm going to go ahead and let Willow go.
Yeah, I think the takeaway from this that I want a lot of people to focus on is, as I mentioned earlier, education is the door to everything. It is the door to a better economy. It is the door to a lesser crime rate. It is the door to lesser poverty. It is the door to everything. It is the door to our future. We need to prioritize within the legislature. Talk to your local legislatures. Talk to them. Tell them that we need to prioritize education, because without education, we have anarchy and nothing else. That's just the facts. And I think we really need to, like Adrian said, stand up for what we believe in. We need to stand up for education, because it's not in a good place right now. And it hasn't been in a good place in Vermont for a really long time. And that needs to change. That needs to change now. And as Gina said earlier, we can use COVID to our advantage. This is highlighting the problems that we need to solve. And so let's start here.
Thank you, Willow. Now I'm going to turn it over to Coach. We're gonna try to make it like less than a minute so that we don't run out, so nobody gets cut off. So go ahead, Coach.
Okay, I guess the takeaway is don't think about boundaries. There are none. If you look at the Q&A box, someone asked a question, it's still there. The answer is right there. You know, we need to forget the boundaries and just think about what the goal is, which is high quality education, K through college in Vermont. End of story. For all.
I hope we wrote that down just the way you said it, because that was pretty great. So I am now going to turn it over to Gina.
Okay, I've got two things. So one on the money end of it, Virginia used to have a campaign called Virginia is for Lovers. And it was a really successful marketing campaign. And people came and vacationed there. And I think Vermont should have a campaign Vermont is for education. And, because if we're just going to try to educate our kids here, and that's great, we should, it's not enough. We need to bring kids in from elsewhere. Right now, we have our kids going out of state. We need to bring more in. It's a relatively, easy on the environment, sort of an industry, and we really need to build it. And there's one other thing. We need to rethink our entire education system. It is a 20th century system, and we are well into the 21st century. And there are a lot of things about it that need to be rethought and blown up and restructured. Pre-K to 12 to 16 doesn't make sense anymore. Education needs to be cradle to grave for many reasons. And I will stop now. Thanks.
Oops, I muted myself. I'm loving these suggestions. I am now going to go to Danny.
So many, almost every question we addressed tonight was about equity. So first, public education is inherently public. There has never been a shortage of education opportunities for people with the privilege to access debt. But for those who cannot access massive amounts of debt, what we do as public educators and in public education at every level is absolutely critical. Building community connections between education and everybody is important for public support. Local people often can't afford to access the locally grown food in the same way. And every time the Cabot truck comes to the local dairy farm, they lose money. Speaking from a friend's experience, getting connections to support through public education all members of our community moves us forward as a state more holistically.
I'm taking serious notes over here. So, Martha.
Thank you, Brenda, and thank you for doing this. I'm hoping people are everyone's taking some notes. My takeaway with or finish up comment is I really think we should be looking at community schools and that kind of a structure, bringing, as Danny mentioned, bringing the community into the system so that there's a big umbrella and you go to your school, whether it be with your 6-week-old child or at age 50 going to get your bachelor's degree. Whichever end of the spectrum, you still have access in that brick and mortar area to many different opportunities, healthcare and daycare and entrepreneurial opportunities. I think we really need to look at that, and that's one way to keep our wrinkly old state alive.
That was great. I love your statement. Really made me giggle. So Brady, and then I'll close this out. But all of you have said such great things. I'm not sure I have anything left. Go ahead.
Thank you. First, Brenda, thank you for setting this up and taking the time to listen to all of our ideas and suggestions and thoughts and concerns. I think for me, the call of action is to continue reaching out to legislators, to encourage them to not only secure that bridge funding, but to invest, and use that term invest because that's what it is, invest in the state colleges moving forward, because it's going to be better for the state in the long run to do that. I know money is hard to come by and it's not an easy task, but that investment will be worth it. And I think we've seeing the impact that our colleges have and can continue to have. So that's my call to action. You're muted.
I keep muting myself, like not muting myself at the end. So, oh, I mean, we did it, and I just want to say that this has been a really incredible panel, and we have some really great calls to action. First of all, my takeaway is that I really like Gina's, Vermont is for education. I certainly experienced it that way. I graduated from Brattleboro Union High School, and I'm a lifelong learner and teacher, and I think that it's extremely important that we commit fully to that. And what I want to ask people to do as my call to action is I want to ask all of you to ensure that you are talking to your legislators, that I'd be remiss not to say that you are helping to elect people who will fund our public education system, whether it's from your school board all the way up to president. We really need you to be working on that, allow democracy to prevail in this setting, even now in COVID. And I want to make sure that we are really having some meaningful conversations. That means letters to your editor. That means talking to your legislators. That means participating in your community conversations around this subject, and really starting to make it a community center. So I guess I had a lot of calls to action there, and I would love to ask any of you and all of you to volunteer. I see that I got a little plug there to do that, and I want to make sure that we do everything we can to secure a strong public education and Vermont State College system in Vermont. And I want to thank every one of you for being here. It has been such an incredible conversation. Join us on the 21st for a conversation about the rise of hate. And this is a national panel. So there'll be panelists from all across the country on that event. But I'm not done working on this, and I would love for all of these panelists to work with me on what I can do as I have a platform and a microphone, what I can do to help push this forward while I still have it, which I hope will be quite a long time. Thank you. Oh, and Kate, oh my gosh, I didn't let Kate go.
No, it's fine. I think every point that I would have made was covered well by the other panelists. So
great. Well, Kate, I'd still love to have a call to action from you. If you want to write it to us, you can, or you can tell us super quick before we get off, and we'll actually let you make the closing statement.
You know what? I will write it for you because my 6-year-old is tagging at my arm right now. So.
Okay, I totally get it. Okay, well, thank you all for coming, and thank you to Progressive Insider and everybody who watched on all the different lots of platforms that we had it on, and to Judy Kanoy for interpreting. And we're looking forward to another event soon and working on this issue going forward. See you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.